and welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on Cards Radio 790 WKRD in Louisville, Kentucky. So glad you're joining us today. This is the program, if you haven't heard it before, that's about all the great stuff going on at the University of Louisville. Research, students, programs, events. We try to cover it all here on the show for the next 30 minutes or so. All right. A UofL scientist has been working with what could be a miracle drug that you may never have heard of. It's called glucan. Vaclav Vetvicka has written a book about it. He'll be here to tell you a little bit later about what he's learned about glucan. Also, he's been around UofL for more than 50 years, first as a student, then as a doctor and founder of some important medical centers, mainly for kids. We'll talk with Dr. Ken Schikler. But first, we're going to a square dance. Okay, we're not really going to a square dance. Not exactly. We're going to talk about dancing and research that shows it could help war veterans with PTSD. Cynthia Corbitt is an associate professor of biology at UofL, while Deborah Denenfield is the executive director of Dancing Well. Ladies, welcome to the dance routine here.
Thank you so much.
So are you two going to get up and show us what you do with these veterans here in a minute?
If you want me to, I'll be happy to.
Well, we're going to have to come up with some music, I guess.
Right.
All right, well, let's talk about this project that you've got going on with veterans who have PTSD and dancing.
Yes. Dancing Well, the Soldier Project, brings group dance, old-time dance, to veterans who have PTSD or brain injury, and we also serve their families and loved ones who are indirectly affected. So what's really been amazing about it is that we've been able to actually scientifically prove that dancing in community with our program improves wellness. And Dr. Corbitt helped us measure that.
So, Cindy, what did you do? How did UofL fit into this program?
Well, I had clearances to be working with people. You know, there are lots of regulations whenever you're taking data from people, and I already had that, and my students already did for another project. And so when Deborah asked if we could help with data collection, we were ready to go, and we could be inserted into the program immediately without having to go through all of that training. Mm-hmm. And so I provided students who were interested in doing a clinical study, and they also ended up dancing and becoming very popular with the group there because they're just really fun, young people. And so we really helped Deborah with doing the surveys, collecting the data, and making sure that everything was done according to human subjects protections, and everything like that. And then once the data was collected and analyzed, I helped write the paper, I helped with some of the stats, I helped make the figures, all that kind of thing to get it published and out there where other people can see what we found.
Right. So, Deborah, let's go back a little bit and exactly what happens. I assume this is in Louisville, right?
It is in Louisville.
You meet on what, Monday nights or something, and you have veterans who show up and dance, or what do you do?
We meet on Tuesday nights, and we hold our dances in series of 10 sessions. And the veterans and their loved ones and a large group of volunteers gather. We have refreshments. We have live music. And the type of dance we do, there is always a dance caller. That's a dance leader. Yeah, it's like square dancing, a dance leader who prompts each move before you do it. And we dance together, we laugh and smile. There's human touch, eye contact, and really a community forms. And I think that that's an important part of our program is that you become part of a group that's going to miss you if you're not there. People with PTSD have a tendency to isolate, and that isolation leads to increased depression and increased suicide.
What are the ages of the vets that were showing up, that are showing up for these dance
I would say they range from late 20s to, we just had one in our last series that was 94.
And these all have PTSD, Cynthia?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, okay.
Many of them do, and that's one of the attractions and why, I think several of them came from recommendations from physicians at the VA that said this might be a good thing for you to do. But in terms of the age and experience, their actual service, many of them are coming from recent, deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, but we also have Vietnam era people as well that still suffer from the consequences of having been in war.
And what's the idea of having the families there with them?
Well, the idea is twofold. Number one, if a family member or a good friend, a loved one of any sort, also gets involved with the program, it encourages that veteran to come every week. Okay. It's like you have a running buddy,
right,
and your running buddy says, no, we really are going to go. Well, then you go. But the second thing is that the family members are also affected by the veteran having either PTSD or a brain injury, because these people's lives are different every single minute of their day because of their affliction. And the families have to deal with that. So our joyful, uplifting, supportive community is of service to them as well. Now, we allow families and loved ones to come with or without their veteran because they need a night out. They need a good time.
Right.
We also allow our veterans to come without anyone else, and we provide some wonderful volunteers who will partner them.
That's Deborah Denenfield. She's the executive director of Dancing Well. Cynthia Corbitt is an associate professor of biology at the University of Louisville, and they worked on this project, Dancing Well. And Cynthia, as we mentioned earlier, you did the research on this with your students. So what did you find? I assume you had X number of veterans that you asked them a bunch of questions and about how they were feeling and those kinds of things? Or what kind
Basically,
of research did you do?
So, and this is in collaboration with a psychology professor at Western
Connecticut State
University,
Okay.
Robin Gustafson. And she actually found the survey instruments that we used. I am not a psychologist by training.
Right.
I'm more of a neuroscientist. But they were surveys that look at avoidance behavior, feelings of optimism, connectedness, so different survey instruments that have been validated. And we asked them to you rank, this statement, I agree with this statement applies to me on a scale of 1 to 5, whatever.
Right.
And you do that before they start the series, and then you do it again after they've danced the 10 weeks. And what we found, you can combine all of these surveys into one wellness score. And what we found is that on average, there was an improvement in wellness in all of the participant groups, even more so in the vets with PTSD than overall. But everyone benefited in terms of these scores in wellness from participating in the program.
How important is that someone with PTSD has a human touch while they're dancing to music? Is that a big part of the study or not?
Well, there have been other studies that have shown that human touch is important. That's not what we particularly focused on, but we believe that the human touch, the eye contact, the live music, and there have been other studies about the effects of live music, that all of these together form a really important safety net for our veterans. Now, Dancing Well, the Soldier Project is developing a leadership training. We have interest from across the nation, and we will be training people on how we organize this so that they can possibly start their own program in their own communities.
This show is going to air in October, and it's my understanding you have another program going in October. So how do people, if they've got a loved one that wants to, that needs to perhaps be in this dancing program, Dancing Well, how do they track you down, or how do they get in the program?
We have a really excellent website. It's www.dancingwell.org.
That's easy to remember.
And there's a contact form on there.
Okay.
Simply go ahead and contact me. I am pretty much everything that's
Jack of all trades
Dancing
for
Well.
Dancing Well.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm the founder, I'm the executive director, and I'm usually the dance leader as well. They contact me, and then we start a dialogue about what we really are.
Okay. Well, Deborah Denenfield, Congratulations on getting Dancing
you.
Well off the ground. And Cindy, good job on the research from the UofL standpoint. Appreciate you being on the show. Well, I'd never heard of glucan until seeing a research study by Vaclav Vetvicka, who's a pathology professor at the University of Louisville. And he's going to talk to us about glucan.
Well, glucan is a polysaccharide, which means it's a combination of single molecules of glucose.
And it's a glucose molecules put together. So is it like a sugar that's found in nature, or?
Could be. You could think about it as a sugar, but it's not sweet.
So it's not going to give you diabetes, or if you have too much of it. Okay. So you started looking at glucan years and years and years ago, right?
Yes.
And you find it where? Where do you find glucan? What's it in?
Well, you can find it almost everywhere in nature because it's in cell walls of grain, in bacteria, in yeast. You basically name it, because it's in the function of making the wall stronger. You can think about it as a steel bar in concrete.
Okay.
So it's everywhere.
All right. So it's everywhere in nature. And you started looking at it, I guess, to see if it had some health benefits, right?
Yes, we did.
What'd you find?
Well, we started it because glucan is not completely new. People started working with it somewhere in the beginning of 60s. But the problem was in that time, there was always insoluble glucan.
Insoluble?
Yeah, people didn't know how to make it soluble. And because of that, the types of reactions or the details were not possible to do. If it's not soluble, you cannot do too much.
Right. What are you going to do with it? You can't make it into a pill. You can't make it into.
You can make a pill.
Okay.
You cannot go for the mechanism of action.
Okay.
You cannot see any receptor, nothing like that. For that, you would need soluble stuff.
Okay.
So when we started here in '91, suddenly the first soluble glucans hit the market. And we immediately started working with them, and from that the ball kept rolling up to now almost 30 years later.
Okay.
So now we know what it can do, to some extent, of course, and we also know how it's done. Okay. So we know how it works.
So does it come in a pill, or do you take shots, or how do you get it into your body?
Well, the shots, people tried that in 80s, and it didn't really work too well. Again, the glucan was not soluble, so they made the suspension in oil. It was very painful, so it was not the right way. But now you can take a pill, basically.
Okay, and when you take that pill, what have you found? Does it have excellent health potential benefits, or what can it do for me?
Well, it's not a silver bullet. It will not cure everything.
Not a panacea. Okay.
But it's pretty close to it. And it's natural, which has a big advantage for some people who doesn't like big pharma and synthetic stuff. You cannot really make it synthetically. That would be so unbelievably expensive. Nobody would even try it.
Okay.
And because it's a natural molecule, you can get it relatively cheaply, just as a natural material.
So I can go to Costco or Walgreens or someplace and buy glucan?
I don't think it's really a Costco product yet, but the internet is full of it, and in some countries you can get it directly in pharmacies.
Right.
And in Japan, it's a really official drug from, I think it's since 1983.
Okay, all right.
So it depends from country to country.
But it's not available on the shelves in the United States yet. It's not FDA approved.
It's not approved as an official drug. It's considered a material which cannot do any harm.
Okay.
And also it's already approved for some healthy benefit claims, like heart problems. So you can find it in cereals, saying, yeah, it's glucan, it has a health benefit. Right. So I would say right now it's on the edge.
All right. That's what I want to talk a little bit more about here in just a second. We're talking to Vaclav Vetvicka, who's a pathology professor at the University of Louisville, and we are talking about glucan, which has been around for a long time. People have known about it, and he's looked at it and says it has some health benefits, basically. So you mentioned heart benefits. What are some of the other things that potentially people could be helped in their treatment of with glucan?
No, the whole thing started with infections, and took about 20 years before we found out that it really helps with any type of infection. There is no bacteria which would be resistant. So if you take it, let's say, before you go to some special vacation, and you want to be sure you won't get sick or something, you start with glucan, and it helps the cells of our body to fight the infection. They are much stronger after glucan. They are just activated and ready to work. And you have to remember that our body needs any help it can get.
Well, you wrote a book called Beta Glucan. I've got it right here, Nature's Secret, that you sent to me, and I read parts of it. And as I was leafing through it, in various parts of the book, it said allergies, cancer, protection from diabetes. So you said it's not a cure-all, but is it potentially just helpful, or how would you describe it to someone who has cancer and they say, hey, should I take glucan? What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them the same I told my mother-in-law when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Just start immediately, don't wait. Take as much as you can get or your body will allow you, and start immediately after the diagnosis. Don't wait after surgery or after chemo. It will just help you in several ways. First, it really activates the immune system, which you really need, or anybody who has cancer does need. Second, it makes the side effects less pronounced, so you don't feel so bad after chemotherapy or irradiation. And also the last benefit is it supports bone marrow. And you have to remember that either irradiation or chemotherapy destroys bone marrow severely. And it takes months before it goes back to normal. If you take a glucan, it takes weeks or days. So the immune system is improved much faster. So there are several benefits for cancer patients just to take glucan. And there is one big advantage of glucan. It's 100% not toxic. You cannot get any harm, you do any harm. The only way how to kill somebody with a glucan is just to beat him with a bag of glucan.
Right.
It's completely untoxic, has no side effects.
So will this ever be a drug that's on the market in the United States or readily available, like I said, at Costco or someplace that I can go get it?
Well, now here you can get it on internet, but
But you're getting it from another country, right?
Well, the companies selling it here are from
Okay.
here, from the United States.
Okay.
It's just not too much of glucan is really manufactured or made in the United States. It needs a relatively big factory to make it, because you are thinking about a large amounts for country of this size. So you make it in tons. So the biggest companies are either in Brazil or in Colombia. But it's just it comes here as a powder. It's analyzed, you get a certification, and the pills are really made here. Okay. As far as a drug goes, as I said, it's officially allowed in Japan as a drug for 40 years, and I think it's coming here. It's not a question if, but the question is when. Okay. Currently, it's always about 80 clinical trials running in the United States. Not all will succeed, but some will. The biggest question is which company will apply to FDA for the permission. That's the problem, is the money.
Right.
And
being able to make enough money off it.
And some of them
get it through the clinical trials.
Yeah, well, some of them are already done,
right.
But still, even the approval is not cheap.
Okay. All right. Well, look for it at some point in the future, perhaps on the shelves in the United States. It's called Glucan, Glucan, and Vaclav Vetvicka is a pathology professor at the University of Louisville, and that's what he's been talking about. We appreciate you being on the show.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for coming
Thank
out.
you.
Dr. Ken Schikler is a pediatrician and professor at the University of Louisville. He's been around these parts for a while. He's here to talk about some of the programs he started, as well as a look at UofL 50 years ago. So I guess a now and then tour of UofL, right, Ken?
It's been a while, yes.
When did you start? You were a student at UofL, so when did you start?
Came here for undergraduate school in 1964. Came down from the Northeast and decided I liked it here, so I stayed for undergraduate school and medical school, did my residency here, spent a year back up in the Northeast doing a postdoctoral fellowship, and then came back and joined the faculty in 1976.
Wow. So you really have spent just about all your life in Louisville, Kentucky, haven't you? Where are you from originally?
I grew up in New York.
Okay, New York City?
I was born in Jamaica, not the one with the palm trees.
Yeah, I know.
Then we moved to Nassau, not the one with palm trees. And
Well, you got a similar story that I have, because I moved to Kentucky when I was 17 years old and been here ever since. And I'm from Rochester, New York. So you got two Yankees here talking across the table from each other. All right, well, let's go back. So over the course of your career, you are now a doctor. You taught classes. What are some of the highlights as you look at them from your years at UofL? And then we'll kind of get into a little retrospective of then and now.
I guess the way, at least for me, the way the School of Medicine has changed from its growth in facilities as well as its change in faculty. In our department, for instance, when I first started, we had a chairman who was a neonatologist and one other neonatologist. We had 1.5 pediatric cardiologists. We had an endocrinologist. We had an infectious disease person, and that was it. Since then,
It was pretty small.
Yeah.
Small staff.
We had a house staff that numbered about 18 total. Now we take 28 residents a year. We have a faculty of over 200. We have divisions of kidney specialists, gastroenterologists, developmental specialists. I started an adolescent medicine program when I got back here, and then started a pediatric rheumatology program. We collaborated with the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, and one of their faculty and I started the Pediatric and Adolescent Gynecology Center back in like 1980, which was one of the first in this region.
Yeah. So did you consider that a highlight? I noticed that on the notes you sent me, some of the things that you've gone through at UofL. The pediatric gynecology, why is that a big deal? I mean, why do you need a separate gynecology unit for adults and for kids?
Well, why do we need pediatrics and internal medicine? I mean,
Fair enough.
Kids are not just shrunk down grown-ups in the developmental process that people go through from infancy to early childhood to early adolescence to middle and late adolescence to young adulthood are all physiologic as well as psychosocial changes that are important to understand. And the problems that a 14-year-old has with regards to reproductive health, with regards to menstrual problems, cramps, the diseases are different.
Right. A lot different than mom.
Yeah.
A lot different than their mother. We're talking to Dr. Ken Schikler. He's a pediatrician professor at the University of Louisville, and as I said earlier, been around UofL one way or another for about 50 years or so. You've also worked a lot with other pediatric departments, and you set up, there was another pediatric department that you helped develop and set up, as well as the gynecology unit.
Rheumatology?
Rheumatology.
Yeah.
What is rheumatology?
It's the study of rheumatic diseases, but that's musculoskeletal conditions, autoimmune diseases, autoinflammatory diseases, basically illnesses that once you've excluded infections and malignancies and metabolic or genetic diseases, it's what else could it be? So it can affect any system in the body, and it's, to me, a fascinating field that we didn't have when I was going through my training, but got interested in what was the first pediatric rheumatology center in Kentucky. And
What did you find? You said you fell in love at the University of Louisville. What did you find at the University of Louisville, and then how has that changed to what you see today on the Belknap campus?
First, finding the university was a challenge. When we got off the interstate, we couldn't find the campus and stopped at a DX station at 4th and Hill and asked the gas station attendant, back when there were gas station attendants, where I could find the university. And he said he'd heard of it, but he didn't rightly know where it was.
At 4th and Hill?
Yes.
I mean, he could have walked 3 blocks and he'd been there, right?
Well, when we found campus, there was Threcold, and Miller had been built. Crawford was new, and that was the extent of campus. I mean, Manual High School was blocks away from campus.
Not anymore.
There were still students living in barracks because there wasn't yet Miller Hall. The teaching buildings have expanded. They used to roll up the sidewalks at 3 o'clock because it was primarily a commuter campus. mostly students from Jefferson County. It was still a municipal college, not a statewide university at that point.
Didn't become that until 1970.
And the growth in changes in the diversity of student population is immensely different. Both my daughters went to UofL for undergrad school, and so being on campus through the years, main campus as well as health science, just has been an exciting expansion.
So what made you fall in love with Louisville if you were sleeping in a barrack as a student and couldn't find the campus when you first tried to show up and it was a tiny campus? What made you stay?
Well, I guess serendipity. My first Derby was something.
See, the Kentucky Derby attracts a lot of people. It attracted Ken Schikler and to stay in Louisville, right?
The weather, the people, and the way it grew from being just a small town to a large city that ended up offering everything that I could have wanted back in New York with a much more affordable and accessible city with arts and excitement, and I have to say UofL athletics as well.
Yeah. What is the change in the difference in the types and the quality of the medical school students that we're putting out now at the University of Louisville, the people that are becoming doctors, nurses, dentists, those kinds of folks? I know you don't have that much contact with the dentists and the nurses, but you do with a lot of the doctors to be. What's the difference between when you were in school, in medical school, and now the quality of the kids that we're putting out? I call it kids, young adults.
My freshman class, I think, had a total of 97 students. Maybe 8 of them were women. That's changed for the better.
Oh, yeah.
There are maybe 15 or 20 of us from the Northeast. Otherwise, it was a smattering of kids from the deep South or the West Coast. They're all basically local people who, had strengths for sure intellectually. Culturally, they're all the same. We were a totally lily white class. And we now have a population of students from across the country. We have graduates in our residency programs from other countries as well as from the United States. So we're much more expansive and diverse with an appropriate view of cultural differences and bring different ways of looking at things. It expanded our ability to do meaningful research and the time to do meaningful research and pass that information on to others around the world.
When you're talking to folks, we'll kind of wrap up and end on this. When you're talking to other folks, perhaps back in New York City, near New York, where you grew up, or you're talking to folks from around the country, and you tell them about your years at the University of Louisville, what do you tell them?
I guess how happy I've been here, how when I've been offered jobs in other medical centers, I stopped accepting them because I realized everywhere I went, I tried to find reasons why there was any good reason to leave Louisville.
And there you go. You wound up staying. Well, we appreciate your service to the University of Louisville, especially to the medical school students that are going through and becoming doctors and out in the world. So, Ken Schikler, appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert, and go Cards.